And it's Ken Kraetzer for CBSI Services, talking business at the Card Forum in New Orleans, and had a terrific session this morning led by moderator Wade Hobbs of Levvel on turf war for payments, and a lot of good insight on product innovation to attract business. And Wade, what were some of the highlights of the session that you led this morning?
Thanks. It was a great session. We had speakers from PSCU, from Fifth Third Bank, and from SunTrust. The goal of the presentation was to really talk about, first of all, how banks can create a payment strategy based on customer experience and customer information. In other words, literally listening to the VOC. Every panel we hear from in the conference here talks about the importance of listening to your customer. This session was really focused on how to listen to your customer. And then the second point that we made was understanding, as a payment strategist, how do you create a payment strategy and a product roadmap based on that customer data. So we heard from PSCU, where they talked a lot about the importance of using data analytics. We heard from Fifth Third Bank, where they talked about the importance of being a customer and listening to others in the bank who are also customers. And SunTrust as well had similar feedback.
We had a question, actually I asked a question about when a product goes from being one for early adopters to one that becomes mainstream, a must-have. As the author once wrote, it reaches a tipping point. And we saw that with ATM machines, we saw it with mobile banking. And when does a bank, how does a bank evaluate when something becomes a must-have?
Yeah, that question was answered by James Ronca from SunTrust. There's really two different ways of looking at it. From a defensive standpoint, you always want to make sure that you're not the last to market with something. If your competitors have it and you're losing market share to them, you need to be in that space, or you need to mainstream that product. From the other side of it, we start to look at an offensive standpoint as if you can head off risk, if you can make sure that you're identifying a gap based on that voice of the customer data, then you can go ahead and productize that, put your dollar there, and mainstream your product. I think a great example that James mentioned there was around the open banking framework. This is something nobody necessarily has just yet. On the other hand, it is a huge security feature that is going to be very, very important. A lot of the open banking framework is going to hit that tipping point before a lot of these banks realize it.
Very good. And you had a panelist, Dr. Debbie Bartow from PSCU, and she talked about what goes into a digital strategy, taking a customer's perspective, what is important to them, and then also a social media strategy, which would be part of digital. What are some of the keys that you felt the panelists indicated about implementing a digital strategy or a social media strategy?
I think in all of those cases, it was all about listening to your customer first and launching what they're really ready for. Social media, for instance, it's a good listening device, but you need to be messaging out towards what the customers are expecting you to say. So when Debbie talked about the digital strategy and the social media, it was with the air of caution, don't get ahead of what they're ready for. In fact, Greg Hansen from Fifth Third made the point about some of the shiny new features of a new chatbot or something like that. In a lot of cases, banks spend a lot of money and they launch these things, customers aren't ready for them. So when you're launching that digital strategy, launching that digital media, the key is don't launch it before your customers need to. But on the other hand, don't be too late either. All of that's based on the VOC.
Well, it kind of brings up the points that Michael Marks of Visa made yesterday, that the expectations are different, generational, older customers versus younger customers. And how do you make that decision that the younger customers want more technology, and older customer just wants a friendly voice on the phone that'll talk to them?
Well, I think a lot of that is some very careful introspection and data diving in your own CRM system to find out who are your customers today, who are your customers going to be in about 2 years by the time you could launch something. A lot of these big banks, especially the small banks, are beholden to a lot of technology and compliance rules that say, if you want to launch something 2 years from now, you better start right now. The trick to it's going to be understanding who your customers are going to be at that point. If they're going to be young customers, they're going to be expecting that digital presence, invest heavily there. On the other hand, at Levvel, we consult with different companies. We are consulting with one bank in Hawaii. The average age of the customers at this community bank in Hawaii is 83 years old. That bank does not need to invest a lot in technology. They need to invest in customer acquisition and try to figure out how many of these customers are really going to be left. So interesting viewpoints on both sides.
Yeah, that's interesting. I wasn't sure which way you were going to say your customer base in Hawaii would be, but I think you have a lot of retirees going out there. But tell us a little bit about your company, Wade Hobbs, Levvel.
Sure. We are a payments technology consulting firm. We help banks, credit unions, insurance companies. We help card networks and processors. A lot of times, banks and credit unions will call us and say, we want to launch Zelle, we want to launch RTP, or we want a new digital payment strategy, but we don't know how to do it. We help them understand what that means to their institution. We also have onshore architects and engineers to help them with the implementation and vendor selection and things like that. So when it comes to a bank wanting to move ahead or launch something new, oftentimes these smaller banks don't have technology departments. That's where we play. That's where we come in. All of us on our staff came from the big bank or network or merchant side of things, and so we don't have any career consultants at Levvel. Everybody we have came from the industry where they made innovations happen, so we know how to work in the regulated space and we know how to get things done quickly.
Very good. And Wade, just a final question, as it's day 3 of Card Forum. Anything that really stood out for you that you heard from a speaker at the event that you felt was really new and different?
Great question. I think Wayne Best from Visa always has the newest and most different stuff out there. Listening to him talk about the economic trends and what's really driving card growth, what's really driving payments growth overall, and the experience of all of the whole banking sector. There's too many to name, too many specific things to go down through, but what I would say is always listen to Wayne Best. He really does know what he's talking about.
And fortunately, his news was the economy should be very strong for the next couple of years, which was good news. Wade Hobbs of Levvel, great to chat with you. You led a very interesting session on product innovation and called Turf War for Payments. Great to visit with you here at Card Forum.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Pleasure. This is Ken Kraetzer for CBSI Services at the Card Forum in New Orleans.